And then we also made some minor adjustments. So we made some bug fixes. Brakes no longer apply at 100%. No longer apply at 100%. So, like, the current brake bug has been resolved. Trains will no longer stop dead in their tracks, causing derailments. Trains will no longer stop dead in their tracks, causing derailments.
A few moments later.
I thought they said they fixed the brakes. This game. I'm done. Vamp, are you on Xbox? Please tell me you're on Xbox. I'm not saving. Ooh, hey guys, I don't rage quit games very often, especially Railroads Online, and, you know, if I had a nickel for every time I did, I'd have 2 nickels, which is weird that it happened twice. But, on a more serious note, I love Railroads Online. I love what it has the potential to become. I've become friends with a few of the developers over the last year or so, and for a while now I've been talking about maybe putting out a video of my thoughts and opinions on what I would like to see from Railroads Online around the 1.0 and beyond, for what I think the game should look like when it hits its 1.0 release. And from the developer feedback I've gotten, I've been highly encouraged to do so. So this video is going to be the start of that. I'd like some feedback from you guys, the community, not just my community, but the Railroads Online community in general. And I would like some constructive criticism. This is not a place for negativity, and if it turns into negativity, I will just stay on top of deleting those comments. I know some of you are very angry with the game right now, and I totally get where a lot of you are coming from in that. I've recently discovered that I was a fairly early player. I wasn't a day one player, but I was right up there with most of you guys. And the only other time that I've really rage quit Railroads Online was the first time we dealt with that brake glitch where it was 100% or nothing. Or at least it felt like it was 100% or nothing. And at the time it made the game feel absolutely unplayable, and there is some like finagling that I've kind of figured out on my own. It kind of makes the brakes work a little bit better with this glitch where you very, very slowly apply them in small increments. But to have gotten that video a couple of days ago of the developer saying that they had fixed the braking issue once and for all, and then immediately pump out an update where it's clear that it's not in the update. Now, maybe that's because we're on the public test branch and we're not on the actual full public version, or I should say the private test, no, yeah, the public test branch, not private test branch. But the fact that we are on the test branch and not the public server, not the stable server, maybe that's the difference. Maybe they haven't included that in this like private server test. I'm probably using the word server wrong here, but I don't know. Anyway, I've spent way too long harping about the brakes. So I think it's pretty obvious. I think the brakes should work on 1.0. One of the really interesting things that I would love to see come from Railroads Online is accessibility to the roof of a car or the top of a load. Right now, when cars are loaded, or just cars that have a roof like a boxcar, it is kind of difficult to get on the roof of the car, especially when the car is in motion or when running the length of the train. Now, I'd like maybe some kind of like invisible hitbox that kind of bridges the gap in between the tops of loads or the tops of boxcars, so that you can run in a straight line down the length of the train without having to worry about dipping down in between every single car. Especially when the train is in motion and you're on a multiplayer server and you're not the host. It is so easy to just get run over by the train and get left behind. And yes, now that we have fly mode enabled for everyone on the server, that's all fine and dandy. However, when the permissions update comes out down the road, fly mode might get locked away to some players so that only the host has it, or a select few members of the server have it. And I think there needs to be more ways to get back on the train than what we have. And also, in this same vein, I'd like for the boxcars to have that whole corner that the ladder is on be climbable, even if it's just an invisible ladder, so that it can be accessed from anywhere on that corner. Right now, it's so easy to bounce off the front or back corner and not actually catch the ladder. Something else that I would love to see is the ability to ride the ladder, to be able to click onto it, to almost sit on the car, so to speak, and to hang off of the ladder on the side of a car, or to hang off the step, or to maybe even just mount yourself to a car by sitting on the end of a car, to be able to ride the shove, so to speak, to use more modern railroad terms. That would be huge beneficiary kind of thing for both roleplay and multiplayer servers. And then also tying back into movement involving the train, going from one end of the train to the other, I would love to see some kind of hotkey, or perhaps you could control click or shift click on a knuckle to be able to go from one far end of the train to the other. I'm not sure how easy it would be to program the train to recognize how many cars are in the train, and then to either teleport you to the engine or to teleport you to the caboose, so to speak. I think that would be hugely beneficial if we could get something like that, especially for us solo players, to be able to shift click or control click the knuckle and teleport to the end of the train to flip a switch, or to do whatever for more roleplay type stuff and not having to fly from one end to the other. Although now that that's having been said, with our new map update, being able to flip switches from inside the map is hugely beneficial. But again, I don't know what the permissions update is going to look like down the road, and perhaps flipping switches from inside the map could get locked, so that the only way for a player to flip a switch is to flip it in person and not on the map. And if that's the case, then I feel like there needs to be better ways for moving from one end of the train to the other than simply running. Especially if you've ever gotten to the point where in your game you're running like 100 cars on a train. It can take a really long time to go from one end to the other, especially as a solo player, and then run all the way back again just to flip one switch. Now again, like I said, that's kind of changed now that we have the new map update, but at the end of the day, again, I'm thinking forward about the permissions update that's supposed to be coming down the road. So keep that in mind when you think about the idea of teleporting from one end of the train to the other. Now, a really big one, again, we're kind of tying into what I was just talking about with protecting the shove and riding cars and things like that. A lot of people I have talked to would love it if we could sit in the train, or sit in the engine, I should say. There's a lot of chairs in a lot of the engines, and it would be really nice to sit in them because it feels like the windows are kind of scaled for somebody sitting in them. And to operate the train in first person, a lot of the times, even with the doors open, you can't see where you're going. And you have to like poke your head out of the train just to see where you're going. And that's kind of annoying. I feel like you shouldn't have to do that, but I've talked a bit about the permissions update, and we really don't know what that's going to look like, but I personally would like to see it as you forming a company or forming a railroad, and I would like to see the structure of the permissions set up like a business. But if it's possible, I'd like for us as the host, for ourselves to be able to name what the different ranks are, so that it's not just something simple like engineer, fireman, etc., etc. You know, I would like it for there to be a little bit more of a roleplay aspect that happens there and allow people to label those permissions. But I'd like the permissions to almost be Discord level roles of complex for those who want it. You know, it'd be really nice to be able to go in and state that an honorary engineer only has access to engine numbers 1 through 12, or whatever the case is, whatever numbers they happen to be, because those are the smaller engines that you trust those players with. And then as they become more vetted and they level up within your company, so to speak, and they become a higher rank, those higher ranks then get access to bigger locomotives. Or perhaps just straight out all the way, you could, instead of giving ranks, you could divide people up amongst teams, and you could say that the sawmill team only gets access to these locomotives because they're the sawmill team and those are the locomotives at the sawmill. Or perhaps even just this team in general are using these 3 locomotives and they have no reason to be using anything else. And for this session, that's all they're going to have access to. I'd love to be able to just lock people into things like that, but I'd love to be able to lock them into less than that. Or perhaps if you're having someone join you for the very first time, and let's say you're a streamer or something and you let them come into your save, it'd be really nice to be able to lock them down and just be like, hey, you're going to flip switches for people, you're going to act like a conductor, you're going to help couple up cars and uncouple cars, and that's all you're going to have access to. You're not going to be able to access the UI on an engine, you're not going to be able to flip switch, or you will be able to flip switches, but you won't be able to do loading or unloading of cars, or maybe you can set that so that they can load and unload cars. That way you can make it so that if someone is untrusted, or perhaps someone who has gotten to 2 strikes, so to speak, and they're kind of on your last nerve, you can really limit how much power they have so that they don't have the ability to grief the rest of the server. So yeah, I'd really like to see it kind of work like Discord permissions. Another really interesting idea is I would love to see more key bindings for interacting with the UI. And my biggest reason behind that is accessibility. And although I don't have an issue with my hands, I do know other gamers that do. And they're kind of staying away from Railroads Online right now because they can't remap keys if those keys don't exist for their accessibility controllers. And so I'd love to be able to see the ability to map all of the HUD to buttons on your keyboard. I know some of the guys from the AD&D we were talking about the other day would love to see Q and A as perhaps the not the regulator, but the reverser, the forward and back, and then keep W and S as your throttle up and throttle down, and then maybe make E and D your brake on and off. Now, I know that Q and E is leaning, but a lot of us aren't even using leaning. And although I know the number keys are used by the developers for being able to spawn things in, I think for players, using the number keys to be able to lean would work just fine, or even just using the number keys 1, 2, and 3 to be able to assign them to something like the cylinder cocks, or to assign the bell or the sander or anything like that. And again, that comes back to accessibility for people who might be staying away from Railroads Online simply due to the fact that they can't set up key bindings for a lot of the stuff that's in the game currently. Something else that I'd love to see if they can get the game a little bit more stable when it comes to prop selection. I'd love to see the bundles of materials that we see on the cars as placeable props. But I'd also like to see more buildings that are geared around the different industries, so that as a save evolves and we build up these industries, we can add more related buildings around them to make it look as though the industry is growing. A really great example of that is when we first started the Swamp Bottom Junction, I actually put 3 of the sawmills in a row in order to make the sawmill look like a really large and industrious sawmill. The problem with this is that then you end up with tons of drop-off and pickup locations practically on top of each other to be able to do that, and that doesn't really work out in the wash. Players aren't really sure where they should be dropping off and where they should be picking up from. And I'd love to be able to add more themed buildings that are obvious as to which industries they belong to be able to build up the industries and make them look more used. Now, I would love to see more variety in the types of industries that we already have. I'd love to see alternative versions. Think of it this way. I would love for us to have access to something like a freight depot that doesn't look like our traditional freight depot. Imagine this. If we had a dock or a set of docks for 2 or 3 rails that would run the length of the dock, and on each side would be different kinds of boats for around the same time period as what the game is based on, of course. But having a shipyard that we could deliver to that would replace the freight depot, I think would be really cool. And going forward and not really knowing what kinds of maps we're going to have down the road, I absolutely think that this is something that may be in store for us later down the road. I just simply don't know, because I've run this by some of the devs before and they've kind of talked in a way that tends to lead me to believe that this is something that they would like as well. They're just not sure how to implement it yet. But I would love to see more variety in the types of industries that we have access to, even if they're just doing the same things that we already have. It would be really wonderful to be able to really thematically theme out a railroad across a whole map, especially if maps start getting bigger, to be able to not just have the same building in 3 different places, but to have the same industry in 3 different places using completely different buildings. I think that would be absolutely wonderful. One thing that I really want to see with 1.0 is I would absolutely love to be able to recustomize engines or cars or things after they have been purchased. And in fact, I almost would like to see some options being locked behind much higher tiers of levels or money, so to speak, so that when you buy an engine and then you continue to run it, later down the road, once you're a higher level, you can then upgrade that engine and add more things to it. And not necessarily upgrade it for the sake of like making it faster or something like that, but just upgrading it to give it a new look. Maybe to add a new paint scheme that wasn't available originally, or to add new headlights, or to take what was oil headlights and turn them into electric headlights, or yada yada yada. I would love to see that as a level of progression that could get added into the game. Character customization. I'm sure it's going to come at some point, but right now I feel like character customization could go a long way simply from being allowed to change John Railroadson's coat color. I think if we had the ability to customize the color of our names as well as the color of our arrows that appear on the map, and then our coat, our petticoat, or whatever you want to call it, the coat that John Railroadson wears, I think it'd be nice if it was lightly tinted in the same color as your name, as well as the arrow that indicates you on the map. I think that would go a huge way for identifying players in a much larger setting. I know a lot of you aren't interested in diesel engines. I personally would love to see some diesel engines at the far end of what inevitably becomes the tech tree, if we ever get a tech tree. Again, at the end of the day, if you don't want diesel engines on your railroad, you don't have to run diesel engines on your railroad. But I would, at the very least, love to see diesel engines running as helper engines to get those small tank engine sized diesels, those little yard power diesels. I think the biggest thing I would like to see in terms of more modern-ish diesel might be perhaps a Jeep, something along the GP range, but I don't want super modern diesel. I think even if they add super modern diesel, I probably won't run it in any of my saves. Now, playing into, more modern-esque looking stuff, I would love to see some steam engine stuff that looks like it's inspired by stuff from the 50s. I know a lot of the stereotypical 50s steam locomotives are all standard gauge, and I know I've heard some rumors floating around that perhaps we might have dual gauge by the time 1.0 comes around, but I don't know if dual gauge is going to be for your entire layout, so to speak, your entire railroad, or if there's going to be like a dual gauge yard that you can put down somewhere where dual gauge stuff will come in, and you'll have to transfer it over to your narrow gauge stuff and then take it to wherever it's going to go. I don't really know. I also don't know if we're going to end up with standard gauge industries that can only be accessed through standard gauge locomotives or something like that, or perhaps have their needs met by much larger cars that would be standard gauge cars. I don't really know. It would be very interesting to have dual gauge, that's for sure. I'm not sure if I would use it that much though on my layout, so. But it is something that I would like to see at some point. Even if it is just cosmetic, I think it would be really nice to have some level of dual gauge, even if it's just cosmetic reasons. Speaking of cosmetic reasons, I would love to see more variety in cars, if not simply for cosmetic reasons. And that's not to say that, like, I want more hopper cars. We've already got, what, 3 of them now? But it's more or less, I want to see some stuff that we may not have a reason to have outside of it just looks cool on your railroad. For instance, I've got a quote-unquote steam-powered crane for my model train set. And I would love to see something like that for our maintenance of way trains, even if they serve no mechanical purpose, and they're simply for cosmetic set dressing. I think it would be really cool to be able to set up cosmetic narratives for roleplay purposes that use these cars, even if they never end up serving a purpose in the final version of the game. And if they're not added, this is probably something that I would consider trying to teach myself how to mod this game to add, just because I want more cosmetic options for telling stories. In any case, these are my thoughts and opinions, and if I think of some more, I'm going to make a second video where I'll go a little bit more in depth. In any case, I feel like this is enough food for thought, and I'm curious to know what you guys think. In any case, I'll see you guys in the next one.